During the filming of this video, I kept hearing a rather alarming thudding noise in the house, and I could not place it, which was kind of unusual because it was 2 a.m. and usually at this point I know what all the sounds are. Couldn't figure it out. Started getting a little bit weirded out by it because it was 2 a.m. And it was only the next morning that I figured out that it was my youngest who has been transitioned from a crib to a toddler bed. He was kicking at the wall and making this very strange thudding sounds. So in the course of making this video, I don't even think the camera picked up the sound, but there was a strange sound in the house and I just couldn't identify it, and it was definitely very distracting. So that's what that was. Hello folks. So I'm sitting here and I'm gonna make this video because I've been trying to make it for 2 hours now and it hasn't clicked yet. It hasn't quite worked out. I keep getting distracted. This is a video where I'm going to end up covering a lot of information, and I'm trying really hard to condense that down because there's far too much information to fit into a single video, and so I'm not going to try. That's the first thing that I realized. I've been talking for months about making a video, Narcissism in the trans community, and I haven't done it yet. And I realized today that one of the reasons is because it's just too big of a subject. There's too much information, and I start to get bogged down and overwhelmed very quickly when I start thinking about it. It's like, oh, I gotta talk about this. Oh, wait, I also have to talk about that. Oh, and I need to mention this. I'm gonna try and keep it simple. We're just gonna dip our toes in the water. And there can be subsequent videos later, but right now, it's a big topic. It's a huge topic. And it's an important topic. And so I made some notes because I don't want to get too sidetracked. There's too much information. But I think it is a very important subject. And so I'm going to try to make this video. Hopefully it works out. Hopefully I stop jumping at shadows. For those of you who are relatively new to my channel, I have pregnancy RLS. I've had it throughout this pregnancy, so I start to fall asleep and then I get jolted awake. And then I start to fall asleep again and I get jolted awake. And the way I've been fixing that lately has been accepting the fact that I'm not going to sleep and just getting out of bed and being awake for the night. Or until I start to feel like I might be capable of falling asleep again. Because the itching and the tingling in my feet, it gets more and more and more intense until I just can't ignore it anymore. And that's what pregnancy RLS does to me. This isn't the first time I've had pregnancy RLS, but it's not been a fun ride in either of those occasions. So I've been looking like absolute hell because I'm extraordinarily sleep deprived, and at 2 a.m. in the morning I'm jumping at shadows too. And so that's kind of not my idea of a great time, but I'm here and I can't escape what's happening to me. And the good news is the baby is healthy. So I'm getting through this. I'm getting through this one way or another. Trans community, narcissism. Narcissism is a problem in the trans community. I'm just going to make that statement, and if you want to try to debunk that statement, by all means feel free to. I've tried making this video a few times where I've talked about the statistics behind that claim. Studies where they found higher than average numbers of narcissists in the trans community than, in the general population. I could talk about that for hours, but then again, there's a lot of information to cover. Let's not waste too much time. So if you want to debate that, is there anyone out there, honestly, who does not think that there's a problem with narcissism in the trans community? Please comment. Please let me know. Because I think we all kind of, I think, I could be very wrong, but I think a lot of us, if not all of us, we kind of feel it. We kind of know there's a problem with narcissism in the trans community. And I think a lot of people in the trans community are saying, hey, not all of us are narcissists, which is very true. Very true. And then people outside the trans community are like, frequently, increasingly these days, unfortunately, a lot of them are like, well, you guys are all just crazy. And, maybe we can ship you all off to an island or something, which isn't a good solution. So let's take a look at the problem with narcissism that exists in the trans community and see what we can do to fix that. Because it's a huge problem, and I'm kind of tired of just living with it. And I think there are a lot of people in this world who are just tired of, they're tired of just living with it. It's like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of people in the trans community who are complete narcissists. But, I mean, what can you do? You just gotta live with it, right? No. How do we fix this? How on earth do we fix this? So I was thinking about that today, and I was like, okay, well, the thing that came to mind for me, the first thoughts, or, the first ideas that came to mind, and granted, we might have to go back to the drawing board. Somebody might point out something really important, and I might be like, okay, we gotta make another video about this and talk about it. But first thoughts, initial impressions, like just dipping our toes in the water, it's gotta be like a two-pronged approach. Because there are two different areas where we really need to focus our attention. The first one's going to be a hell of a lot easier than the second. We need to start calling out bad behavior. We need to start weeding out and focusing on bad behavior on a very localized level. So, as rough as this is going to be, if you notice that your trans friends, if you're, a member of the trans community or an ally to the trans community, and I think sometimes the allies are worse than the actual trans people. Have you noticed that? Like, sometimes the allies are the really aggressive ones. But anyway, if you notice someone being just really, really flipping rude, point that out to them. Let them know. They might not be aware that they're being just ridiculously rude. If you see someone being toxic or manipulative, don't let them get away with it. And I'm pretty sure that when it comes to dealing with narcissism on like a one-on-one level, that's a delicate thing to do. And that's going to have to take like its own whole video, because like you can't just call a narcissist out on their bad behavior and be like, hey, you're being really rude, and then expect them not to retaliate. And that's a problem. So, on a localized level, we're going to have to deal with narcissism in the trans community. And that kind of goes back to this video that I made at the very tail end. I was talking about how the BDSM community has been really, really good. At least it was a decade ago when I was involved in that community. It was really, really good about warning people about toxic behaviors, raising awareness about toxic behaviors. What do toxic behaviors look like? What are some red flags that you should avoid? All that stuff. That's a structure that we have to build in the trans community. Because if we build that, it's going to get rid of so many of the problems in the trans community. And it's something that if you're doing it on a local, on a small level, that's something. So often when people want to change things, they want to do big changes. And a single human being can't do big changes very well. A single human being can make a massive impact if they enact small, local changes. And that's the small, local change that I think is going to really transform the trans community. Odd way to say a phrase. If we start really focusing on identifying toxic behaviors and just not tolerating them. I'm not saying not tolerating toxic individuals, and I'm not saying identifying toxic individuals, because I think we've kind of been doing that for a while now. We see a public freakout video and we call that person out and say, hey, that person's a horrible person. It's like, that's cute and all, but unfortunately that just kind of gives people this idea that, oh, trans people are horrible people. Let's focus on the behavior. Let's focus on identifying the behaviors instead of identifying individuals. Let's just kind of create like a blanket set of rules. Like, when you see someone doing this, that's coercive, that's manipulative, that's not a nice thing that they're doing to you. That's one prong of the Let's Fix the Trans Community project. It's actually quite daunting, but I think that that's the easier one of the two prongs of my little solution that I've come up with. And that's something that's, again, going to require its own videos, because I don't know how to do that. And I've been kind of looking at it as like, well, maybe I should make a video on that. And this was going to be the video on that. But then it was like, well, I need to do a lot more research. I don't feel like I'm qualified to... I don't think I'm qualified to make that video. Like, I just don't understand narcissistic behavior quite that well. So really what I should do is spend like a few days combing back through various BDSM websites to look at how they have their list of red flags and warning signs, just to see how they've designed that. And I probably will do that and see if I can't make a video at some point. But that's the first prong. Second prong, let's go over there. This is the more theoretical, hypothetical prong. This is the more individual people aren't going to be able to do this, but we need to do this. And this is the big one. I think that while it's going to be good and important to revamp elements of the trans community on a very small, very localized level as individuals, which is something that's doable, like individual people can do this, I think we also need to look at the overarching structure of the trans community. And so what I have in my head, the image that keeps coming to my mind, because it comes in as an image, is this massive skyscraper, but it's kind of an older skyscraper, and it's got cracks running up and down the walls of the building, and it's like, that's a problem. Like, that's bad. There are some very clear structural flaws in this building. And that's what the trans community looks like to me right now. There are some deep structural flaws in the community, and we need to fix those. Like, one of the very first things that I looked at when I started talking about the trans community was this sense I get that people feel a need, especially like people who are trans, who are kind of trying to interact with the community. They feel a need to tiptoe around issues in the community. They feel like they need to be very, very careful when they talk in the community or interact with people in the community, because you don't entirely know 100% what you can get away with saying and what you can't get away with saying. Now, that was when I first started talking about it, which was many months ago, and I think culturally we're starting to notice some sort of a shift, and I can't be 100% certain that I'm putting my finger on it exactly. It's more of a kind of an underlying feeling. I think culturally we've kind of reached that tipping point where people are just so sick of the crap that they're starting to become increasingly open about their lack of patience for it. And maybe what I'm seeing, maybe what I'm feeling, is the beginning of the swing of the pendulum from where it was, which was way too far to the left, and now it's going over to the right. And unfortunately, when I'm on Minds, I always have this really unnerving feeling that they're going to swing it all the way over to the right, and those people are going to try to take control for a while, and that's going to be all kinds of fun. Personally, I like when the pendulum is as still as possible, like dead center-ish, kind of just bouncing back and forth in that little center. Like, let's be fair to everybody and give everybody, more or less what they want. It's very difficult to achieve something like that. More often the pendulum swings, and then as it swings, it builds momentum. And I remember being young, and it was on the right, and I hated the right-wingers because they were just so dogmatic. And oh my God, you moralistic assholes. Like, why do you feel the need to get up in everyone else's business and, put your God and your church in my life when I'm not even a Christian? Like, what the hell? And then it swung. And I never thought that the left could be so obnoxious. But look at what they've done over the last few years. It's been freaking ridiculous. Look at the just completely almost inexcusable behaviors. And now I think it's starting to swing in the other direction. I think I'm starting to feel that change in momentum, and I could be wrong. It's very subtle, but I'm noticing a lot more people who feel a lot more confident speaking out against the trans community. I'm noticing a lot of things that are happening in the trans community that are absolutely unacceptable. And people are calling it out more and more. They're being more and more vocal. And that, I think, is the beginning of the pendulum swing. And I'm terrified, honestly, that it's going to swing all the way back over to the right. And then we're going to have all the right-wingers doing all the same ridiculous shit that all the left-wingers were doing. And me being a centrist, I'm just going to be sitting here in the middle going, can't we all just play nicely with each other? And you see, this is another problem with being a centrist. No matter what, I'm always going to be pissing off someone. So no matter who's in power, they're still going to hate my guts. But I think the people I need to be afraid of nowadays might be shifting. So that'll be interesting when that happens. Let's see, one of the things I've got written down here, and I'm wandering off topic, so I should probably refer to my notes. A lot of people have said that the trans community feels like a cult. So going back to that, people feel like they can't talk in the trans community, like they can't speak freely, like they can't communicate ideas. Granted, this was several months ago, things are starting to shift, but that's an indication that you're in a cult. If you're in a cult, one of the warning signs, one of the little red flags that you're in a cult is that you can't just say what you're thinking because you're afraid to have opinions that are not orthodox to the cult. So that's a big red flag. That's a warning sign. That's something to pay attention to. Is the trans community like a cult? Because a lot of people will be, they'll bristle at that. They'll be like, what do you mean the trans community is like a cult? You're one of those right-wing people who hates trans people, aren't you? No, the right-wing people hate me too. Everybody hates me, which means I'm probably doing my job right. Is there a cult-like element to the trans community? And I would say yes. I'd say that, in fact, the people who are saying that it's like a cult are hitting the nail on the head far more accurately than they realize. And here's the reason why I think that. Cults, the structure of a cult, it's usually like a little triangle, right? A little pyramid shape. There's a narcissist, and he starts building the cult, and the cult grows, and it grows, and it grows, and it grows, but the narcissist is always sitting there at the top of the cult. He's the leader, he's the God figure. He's that messianic personage that everybody's looking up to, so the pyramid grows. But it grows at the bottom. It never grows at the top. The top stays right there. It's always a narcissist. I'm trying to think of any cult that's ever been started by someone who wasn't a narcissist. Again, leave it in the comments. That would be kind of interesting to read the history of. I can't sleep at night, and I'm getting weird and jumpy around, the sounds of the house settling. So by all means, please give me some distractions here. But that's just about every cult that I've ever seen. You get your narcissist. He grabs a few followers, then a few more, then a few more. The pyramid grows. Narcissism is a problem in the trans community. And so if you look closely at the trans community and the subculture of the trans community, you're going to start to notice patterns that are very reminiscent of cults. And that would be because some of the leadership, now it's not a cult exactly, because there's not one, messianic figure leading the group. But you're going to notice that because there are people in leadership positions in the trans community who are narcissistic, there's this trickle-down effect. And that looks and feels like being a member of a cult. And so that's why, I honestly think that's why it feels that way. And so, in order to fix that, we're going to have to go through the entire subculture of the trans community. Was that you? I can't wait till I can sleep at night. It's going to be amazing. We have to go through the entire subculture of the trans community and try to identify behaviors that are rooted in narcissistic thinking. Not saying that all the people in the trans community who do these behaviors are narcissists. In fact, they're probably not. But somewhere along the road, at the top of the power structure, a narcissist decided that this was a good idea. And then it started to trickle down because that was the orthodoxy that the narcissist built for the cults. And now everybody follows it because it's part of the orthodoxy of the trans community. And I'm going to give an example of that people aren't going to like, but it's true. And I'm going to explain why that is an example. But before I do that, let me look at my notes again, make sure I'm not missing anything. I think it's important to take the time to break this down. I think it's important to take the time and fit all the puzzle pieces together and explain how they fit together. Because I think too many times people have said the trans community feels like a cult, or the trans community is a cult. And it's very easy for people inside the community to look at it and say, well, that's an outsider's opinion. They're just trying to throw criticism on us. They're just trying to call us names. They're just trying to say that we're bad or whatever. And I think it's an accurate statement, but we have to be able to pick apart the why behind that. We have to be able to look at it and say, okay, if we're going to call the trans community cult-like, God, I wish I could sleep at night. If we're going to call the trans community cult-like, it's funny, I'm not afraid of death, but I get jumpy around strange noises in the middle of the night. If we're going to call them cult-like, we have to be able to explain the why behind that. You can't make a claim without having some sort of basis for that claim. Not because the people who've made the claim in the past are wrong for not having a basis, but because if I'm trying to justify, hey, let's make big changes to the trans community, why? Why should we do that? Well, let's figure out if there is, in fact, any veracity to the idea that there is this cult-like pyramid effect, where you've got narcissists at the top who make some rules, those rules trickle down, and suddenly you have not a true cult structure, but a semi-cult-like structure. It's more like a tower, it's less like a pyramid, but it's still the same problem, the same series of problems. Very similar structure. And the example that comes to mind, the biggest example, the one that's been most glaringly obvious to me, and it's not one that people are going to like, but it's there, is the pronoun game. And I know there are a lot of people who've talked to me in the comments and they've been like, the pronoun thing really isn't that big a deal. It's not that big of a problem, It's just being polite. I think that the pronoun game is one of the biggest signs that narcissistic thought at some point, on some rung of the ladder, has heavily influenced the culture of the trans community. And I would like to explain why I think that, because I think it's important to know the why. There are narcissists in the trans community. I'm very convinced of that. And I mean, again, logic is built on a chain. So if that part of my logic is fallacious, then I need somebody to point it out to me, because everything after that is also going to be flawed. That's how chains of logic work. But I don't think I'm wrong there. I think that there is a problem with narcissism in the trans community. I think most of us think, or at least feel on some level, that there's a problem with narcissism in the trans community. And you might be looking and saying, well, what makes the pronoun game so offensive? Because a lot of people are very adamant about the pronoun issue. They're very emotionally charged about it. On one side of the fence or the other, it doesn't really matter. People they have strong feelings about it. So why would I focus on the pronoun game? And let's go back to what people have told me. And I feel bad because I know I'm going to say some things people just don't want to hear, but please be patient with me, hear me out. A lot of people, and I've got it written down here in a chain, it's just polite. The pronoun thing, it's just polite. Just use a person's pronouns. It's just a polite thing to do. And that makes a lot of sense, except when you're dealing with a narcissist, you have to be aware nothing is innocent. Narcissists are manipulative. And because narcissists are manipulative, they often disguise their manipulations as politeness. They understand that the people around them are going to want to be generally good, nice, polite people. And so anybody in the dark triad is going to use that information to take advantage of other people and manipulate them into doing whatever they want. Dark triad, if you're not familiar: narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism. Narcissism, of course, is diagnosable. Psychopathy usually gets diagnosed as antisocial personality disorder, and nobody really messes with Machiavellianism too much, at least as far as I'm aware. But those three groups of people, and in varying degrees of intensity, understand that people around them are going to try to be nice. And they use that to manipulate the people around them in order to get what they want. So whenever you suspect that there might be a narcissist manipulating you, you can't just be nice by default. You have to look at what you're doing, and you have to look at the behaviors that you're enacting, and you have to ask yourself, is this actually a nice thing, or am I being manipulated into doing something to make a narcissist happy? That's what that sounded. It's his freaking claws. Oh my God. Dude, you scare the shit out of me. So how do you know the difference? That's the other important question. Like, if you suspect there's a narcissist, you have to figure out whether or not you're being manipulated. How do you know the difference? And one of the big things is coercion. And I've got here in my notes, just very quickly, politeness is optional, manipulation is coercive. And so that's where the pronoun game gets to be a little bit darker and a little bit less nice than we all want to think that it is. So when you're in a situation, and we'll go with the pronoun game as an example because that's what we're talking about anyway. You're in a situation, you have a friend, and it's a very dear friend. It's someone that you care about and you treasure. And they come out to you and they say that they're trans and that they've decided they're going to transition. They've put a lot of thought into it. It's been many years, and they finally decided that this is the right choice for them. And so they're going through their transition, and you're watching them go through this transformation. And you care about this person, you love this person, and they're switching from, he, him to she, her, or whatever. And you use their pronouns because even though they don't quite look it yet, you're trying really hard to support them in this journey that they're undergoing. And you want to make them feel comfortable. You want to make them, you want to help them. And this is how you're helping them. That's being polite. That's being nice. That's being supportive. That's being kind, But technically, you have the option not to do that. You wouldn't not do that because you care about this person, you value them. But you have the option not to. If you wanted to, you could just say to them, yeah, no, dude, you're always going to be a guy to me. I'm sorry. That's just it. You are actively choosing to use their new pronouns and help support them in their journey because you care about helping them. You're not being manipulated. You're helping them. Coercion is when you're a parent and your kid comes to you and they say, I've been talking with the school counselor and I think I'm a boy now. And you say, whoa, I've got some questions here. Why do you have a new name picked out already? Why are you telling me that your new pronouns are they, them? Or, these days, because the internet is an interesting place, muffin self. Like, how do you expect me to follow along with all this? This is kind of a big change that you're trying to hit me with in the face, and I'm not adapting too well. I've got a lot of questions, and I think we need to talk about this. And the next thing you know, CPS shows up at your doorstep and takes your kid away. And they tell you that you can't have your kid back unless you're supportive of their transition. Or whatever the fuck it is that they're telling people right now. You're not being given options here. That's coercion. You are being threatened with extremely unpleasant circumstances if you don't play a pronoun game with someone. It's not about being polite. It's not about being nice anymore. All of a sudden, it's taken a really dark, twisted, wicked turn, and you're going to lose your custody of your kid. That's not okay. I think most normal people all recognize that that is not okay. Yes, there's some crazy people on the fringes who are like, no, parents shouldn't have a right to their kids. Bullshit. We brought them into this world and we intend to raise them to be healthy, functional adults. And we trust us to do that a hell of a lot more than we trust some faceless institution that doesn't give a shit about them at the end of the day. And, I tend to feel strongly about that because God knows there was once upon a time a faceless institution that didn't give a shit about me, and I nearly died a few times because they just couldn't be bothered to take good care of me. So yes, I understand. It's very important. Parents ought to be able to have access to their kids. It's coercion. That is coercive. It's manipulative. It's not nice. Do what we tell you, or we're going to do something unpleasant to you. Do what we tell you, or we're going to be not nice to you. Do what we tell you, or you're going to lose your job. Do what we tell you, or you're going to go to jail. Do what we tell you, or you're going to lose your child. At the end of the day, if you don't do what we tell you to do, bad things are going to happen to you. That's coercion, folks. That's what that looks like. It's not fun. It's not nice. And it's not about just being polite at that point. At that point, you are under threat. You're embattled. That's coercion. And so next time that you're in, some situation and you are trying very, very hard to use the proper pronouns because you're afraid of what's going to happen to you if you don't use the proper pronouns, that's coercion. You are being coerced. Maybe you're being very aggressively coerced. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my kid. Or maybe you're being subtly coerced. I work at a restaurant and I accidentally told this table of trans women, hey, you guys want a refill on your sodas? And they just jumped at me and asked to speak to the manager, and now I'm kind of creeped out. Because I say you guys to everybody at every table. It doesn't matter if they're male or female. It's just kind of a general term, right? It's coercive. It's manipulative. You do what I want you to do or else. And I mean, all these examples, this is the thing that hurts. This is the thing that people don't want to hear, but all of these examples are real life situations that I've seen in the trans community. All of which would indicate that somewhere along the way, there were narcissists, and narcissists love to climb that social ladder because they love the status, they love the recognition, they love the power. And they made these rules and told everybody about these rules because it made them feel powerful and it gave them what they wanted. So now, because of the way cults are structured, the orthodoxy is spoken and it trickles down through the cults. And now we've got teenagers who are being taught at schools through various different outlets that it is okay to choose the pronouns puppy self. And if mom and dad don't like your new pronouns... And before we go any further, I want to be clear. I do understand the subtleties of the situation here. In the gay community for a very long time, there were a lot of gay kids who had to hide their sexuality from their parents. And it could be really rocky, and it could be really difficult, and it could be really emotionally taxing. And I understand why the trans community is looking at it and saying, hey, we don't want that for our, for our fellow trans people. At the same time, I look at the research, I look at the number of people who are detransitioning, and I think that I've listened to so many stories from parents of kids who come out as trans, and the parents are like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. And I remember one mother, she took her child out to a farm and just made sure that the girl, got away from social media, got to go outside, got to just kind of work with her hands and, just be out in nature. And that girl wasn't trans. And she didn't feel trans after a while. It was just, I think there's a lot going on. And I think that the trans community as a whole needs to acknowledge the existence of things like ROGD. It's a real thing. Another case, there was a father who, his son was autistic, and I can't remember if he was homosexual or bisexual or something like that. And the dad realized that what the son really wanted wasn't to be a woman. It was to go out and wear really nice clothes that were really soft and had lots of texture and color. And once they started doing that for this particular individual, the idea of being trans just didn't have that much appeal. There are going to be those cases. In fact, there are going to be many, many of those cases. And so the idea that we should secretly transition kids without their parents' knowledge in the school and then hide that information from the parents, which there's a court case open right now where that's exactly what happened. And it's happening throughout the country. This is not a good solution. This is not a good way to handle this kind of situation. And I don't know any way around that. And I think the trans community needs to take the time to really look at that and acknowledge it, because I know so many individuals come forward and they're like, if I'd been allowed to transition when I was young, my life would be so much better. And it's like, yes, that's great for you, but you're only one person. And there are many, many, many different kinds of trans people in this world. Not everybody needs the same things. And when it comes to the dangers and the risks associated with some of these transition drugs, especially when they're used on young people, I can't see the justification. I just can't. I haven't seen it yet. If you have any justification, please share it with me. We can hash it out. We can talk about it. Those conversations are important. But as of today, I still haven't seen any good reason why young people who are not adults should be transitioning. So I'm just going to say that. I understand that's a delicate area for a lot of trans people, but this is what I keep seeing. Just try some new pronouns. See how it feels. It's not that innocent. It's never that innocent. Whenever you get the dark triad involved, it stops being innocent. Narcissists are the dark triad. They're in there. They're one of those three parts of the dark triad. They are totally not being innocent, and this is not an innocent game that we're playing. It's time to get rid of the pronoun game. I think it is a toxic element of the structure of the trans community, and I believe that it was initiated by people who are narcissistic, who wanted to have power and control over other people around them. And I think it's been perpetuated throughout the community because that's how cults work. And the trans community isn't a cult, not 100%. We don't have a central godhead, but you do have that power structure. And so many people in the trans community have, issues like autism, where they are, number one, prone to black and white thinking, naturally. And number two, they don't have this innate sense of social understanding. And I say this as a person who also really sucks at social stuff. I don't think I'm autistic, but I suck at social stuff. So, I can totally empathize. If someone tells you, hey, these are the rules, particularly if you're prone to black and white thinking, it's going to be very easy to just go with that. It's like, okay, that's really nice. Somebody told me what the rules are, so now I know how to play the game. This is really awesome. It's one more way for me to understand socialization so that I can go out and I can do it right. And that's really awesome. And so I think many of the people who are going around with the crazy pronouns, I think honestly, many of them are mentally ill members of the trans community who are easily manipulated because they're struggling with a mental illness. I think many of them are autistic members of the trans community who are honestly probably pretty grateful that someone is explaining social nuances to them and social subtleties to them. And they don't realize that they're being manipulated by narcissists. I think that this is a set of ideas and rules that is being perpetuated by a lot of mainstream educational figures. I remember being in college and taking that stupid gender studies course and being horribly disappointed by it. But I can totally see them playing by these rules. And the rules are based on queer theory, which is just a set of ideas that someone came up with at some point. Where's the grounded basis in reality? Where's the point where the theory connects to reality and forms that hard, tangible surface? It's not there. Again, I go to Blanchard's theory, and people hate Blanchard's theory for a number of reasons, but Blanchard actually did research. Blanchard actually looked at real individuals and tried to understand what was making them tick. That's not something that we see with queer theory. Queer theory is a set of social ideas. They're amorphous and they're floating around in the air, and they never had to make solid contact with reality. And the pronoun game is part of that. It's theoretical. I'm purple gendered. What does that mean? Nobody can really figure it out. You might have some very artistic explanation for what it means, but at the end of the day, how does it function in reality? And it doesn't. It falls apart. But people are being taught this is the way that the world works. They're being taught that in a very institutionalized manner, which is very terrifying because I don't think anyone's stopped to look at it and say, how does this actually work? And I think part of it is because a lot of people are trying to be polite and they're trying to be supportive and they're trying to be good allies. And you got to remember, when you're dealing with narcissists, you can't be innocent. You can't be polite naively when you are dealing with a narcissist. Because narcissists are dark triad, and dark triad likes to manipulate people by using the things about people that are predictable and easy to manipulate. Like, that's what they do. By using people's innate well-meaning, their goodness, their kindness. That's what dark triad people prey upon. And so that's what I'm seeing. That's what I see when I look at the trans community. And it's like, I can watch a million YouTube videos and read a million articles on 10 red flags to look for when dealing with a narcissist. And usually it's, are you dating a narcissist? And it's like, well, that's not really helping me here with my research. But that's not important. I'm not sure how important that is. But that's not something I want to talk about this video. This video is long enough. And I don't think that's nearly as important as just laying out that initial ground rule. When dealing with narcissists, you can't afford to be naive. Narcissists will manipulate you utilizing your good nature. That's what they're going to focus on because most people are good-natured. And predators love that because it makes them predictable. And if someone's predictable, you can kind of steer them wherever you want them to go. That's how predators work. You understand that, and then you take that information and you start looking at the trans community, and it starts getting very scary very fast, because a lot of things that we all think are innocent, they're not. And that's why so many people are so antagonistic to the trans community. They don't have a problem with trans people being trans. They have a problem with the structure of the community itself, because that structure has been so heavily influenced by narcissistic individuals. And that's rough. That's rough. I don't know a better way to say it. It's a very unpleasant thing to contemplate. But if any of us want the trans community to get better and become a healthy thing, we need to acknowledge this. And unfortunately, in acknowledging it, we have to consider the implications of it. The pronoun game needs to go. There's just, I don't know any other way around it. If you want to help someone and support them by using their pronouns, that's fantastic, because then you are being polite. You're not being manipulated. You're being kind. But we can't coerce people into using pronouns. And honestly, all these made-up pronouns, they're just made up. It just muddies the water. It just confuses things. It just makes more of a mess, because the more messy and confusing things are, the easier people are to manipulate. Anyway, I think that's it for this video. At least that's all my notes. I figured that was enough. Like, it seemed like a very simple set of notes. It's only one page, and it's already been about 45 minutes. So I'm going to wrap this one up, and hopefully, I don't know, hopefully it's a good start. Again, I'm saying things that I just don't think people are going to want to hear. But these are the conclusions that I have come to, and if I'm wrong, by all means, please tell me, because that's a discussion that we need to have as well. I hope you are all in good health, and I will talk to you guys later.